Okay, hello and welcome to another edition of IlluminAnneReads. This is the third installment of Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, which is super exciting and fun. Yay! I'm a little bit low energy, and I'm going to be a little bit low energy for a while because we are moving. We are moving in 2 months instead of the 4 that I thought I had, and that's super stressful. So to that end, and I'll make another announcement on Sunday, but most of the stuff on this channel, what little it is, well, mostly the gaming videos are going to stop. I'm probably still going to continue to do these live stream reads, just because it's going to be a nice sanity thing for me. But hello, Apollo. Yes, hello. He wants to be a part of the stream. But it's a lot. So I'm not going to do the gaming videos. I'll try to do ukulele videos in the meantime to just get those up there. I have 3 gaming videos that are going to come up, some more Paper Mario stuff. Because I know one of my friends really likes that. So I'll put those up there. And then we're going to cease and desist the gaming. Hey, what? I'll pick you up if you keep doing that. And I know you hate it. So I'll keep doing the gaming videos as when I move. So that's exciting. And next Thursday, there won't be any reads next Thursday or Sunday because I am going to visit someone. We're doing another little weekend trip, and but then I'll be back, and it'll be back on schedule until we move, whenever that is, whenever we find a place, sometime in August. So it's new and exciting and stressful. Only a little bit. It's mostly more exciting than anything else. I've been doing more cleaning. More cleaning than I ever have in this place, cleaning up things that probably should have been taken care of years ago, but I didn't because, hindsight is 2020. Anyway, so I found some fun things. I found some old memorabilia. I found a lot of stuff I can get rid of. I have all of these hats. I love hats. But when you think about having to drive across the entire U.S., basically, well, half of the U.S., then you're like, you know what? I haven't worn this since I got it. Let's get rid of it. Just donate it right out. So that's what I'm going to do. That's what I've been doing. That's what my life is. But thankfully, you won't see any of that because I have my little barrier. So all you'll see is my lovely, calm little nook I made for myself. And we can escape into a book for an hour, which is so nice. It's going to be such a good escape from the trials and troubles of the world and the stress of moving. So let's see. What happened last time? If anybody in chat remembers, that would be lovely. Yes. Percy Jackson, who previously has killed a Minotaur and watched his mother die, which was intense. Percy Jackson woke up to find himself at Camp Half-Blood, run by the god Dionysus, who's being punished because he couldn't keep his grubby little hands to himself. Good old Dionysus. And so it's a camp for children of the gods. And we sort of know that. Percy doesn't really know it yet, but we all do. And he met Mr. Brenner, who confirmed himself to be Chiron, the centaur. And what's his face? His best friend. What was his name? Grover. Grover is a satyr. He's got little goat legs, and it's very cute. And let's see, when we last left them, Percy Jackson was about to go to his cabin and meet the other campers. So I say we dive on in. Chapter 6. I become supreme lord of the bathroom. Once I got over the fact that my Latin teacher was a horse, we had a nice tour, though I was careful not to walk behind him. I'd done Pooper Scooper patrol on the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade a few times, and I'm sorry, I did not trust Chiron's back end the way I trusted his front. We passed the volleyball pit. Several of the campers nudged each other. One pointed to the Minotaur horn I was carrying. Another said, "That's him." Most of the campers were older than me. Their satyr friends were bigger than Grover, all of them trotting around in orange Camp Half-Blood t-shirts, with nothing else to cover their bare, shaggy hindquarters. I wasn't normally shy, but the way they stared at me made me uncomfortable. I felt like they were expecting me to do a flip or something. I looked back at the farmhouse. It was a lot bigger than I realized. 4 stories tall, sky blue with white trim, like an upscale seaside resort. I was checking out the brass eagle weather vane on top when something caught my eye. A shadow in the uppermost window of the attic gable. Something had moved the curtain just for a second, and I got the distinct impression I was being watched. "What's up there?" I asked Chiron. He looked where I was pointing and his smile faded. "Just the attic." "Somebody lives up there?" "No," he said with finality. "Not a single living thing." I got the feeling he was being truthful, but I was also sure something had moved that curtain. "Come along, Percy," Chiron said, his light-hearted tone now a little forced. "Lots to see." We walked through the strawberry fields, where campers were picking bushels of berries while a satyr played a tune on a reed pipe. "I'm sorry." Chiron told me the camp grew nice crops for export to New York restaurants in Mount Olympus. "It pays our expenses," he explained, "and the strawberries take almost no effort." Strawberries are a favorite of the god Hermes, by the way, just so y'all know. Just throwing it out there. Because he was found under a strawberry plant. He said Mr. D had this effect on fruit-bearing plants. They just went crazy when he was around. It worked best with wine grapes, but Mr. D was restricted from growing those, so they grew strawberries instead. You can still make strawberry wine. I watched the satyr playing his pipe. His music was causing lines of bugs to leave the strawberry patch in every direction, like refuge fleeing a fire. I wondered if Grover could work that kind of magic with music. I wondered if he was still inside the farmhouse, getting chewed out by Mr. D. "Grover won't get into too much trouble, will he?" I asked Chiron. "I mean, he was a good protector, really." Chiron sighed. He shed his tweed jacket and draped it over his horse's back like a saddle. "Grover has big dreams, Percy. Perhaps bigger than are reasonable. To reach his goal, he must first demonstrate great courage by succeeding as a keeper, finding a new camper, and bringing him safely to Half-Blood Hill." "But he did that." "I might agree with you," Chiron said, "but it is not my place to judge. Dionysus and the Council of Cloven Elders must decide. I'm afraid they might not see this assignment as a success. After all, Grover lost you in New York. Then there's the unfortunate fate of your mother, and the fact that Grover was unconscious when you dragged him over the property line. The council might question whether this shows any courage on Grover's part." I wanted to protest. None of what happened was Grover's fault. I also felt really, really guilty. If I hadn't given Grover the slip at the bus station, he might not have gotten into trouble. "He'll get a second chance, won't he?" Chiron winced. "I'm afraid that was Grover's second chance, Percy. The council was not anxious to give him another either after what happened the first time 5 years ago. Olympus knows I advised him to wait longer before trying again. He's still so small for his age." "How old is he?" "Oh, 8. "What? And he's in 6th grade?" "Satyrs mature half as fast as humans, Percy. Grover has been the equivalent of a middle school student for the past 6 years. Oof, poor satyrs." "That's horrible." "Quite," Chiron agreed. "At any rate, Grover is a late bloomer even by satyr standards, and not yet very accomplished at woodland magic. Alas, he was anxious to pursue his dream. Perhaps now he will find some other career." "That's not fair," I said. "What happened the first time? Was it really so bad?" Chiron looked away quickly. "Let's move along, shall we?" But I wasn't quite ready to let the subject drop. Something had occurred to me when Chiron talked about my mother's fate, as if he were intentionally avoiding the word death. The beginnings of an idea, a tiny, hopeful fire, started forming in my mind. Chiron, I said, if the gods on Olympus and all that are real. Yes, child. Does that mean the underworld is real too? Chiron's expression darkened. Yes, child. He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. There is a place where spirits go after death, but for now, until we know more, I would urge you to put that out of your mind. What do you mean until we know more? Come, Percy. Let's see the woods. Oh, hello! I'm glad you made it! I hope learning how to drive a stick shift was good, Amanda. I hope you had lots of fun. We are going to see the woods with Chiron. As we got closer, I realized how huge the forest was. It took up at least a quarter of the valley, with trees so tall and thick you could imagine nobody had been there since the Native Americans. Chiron said, the woods are stocked if you care to try your luck, but go armed. Stocked with what? I asked. Armed with what? You'll see. Capture the flag is Friday night. Do you have your own sword and shield? My own? No, Chiron said. I don't suppose you do. I think a size 5 will do. I'll visit the armory later. I wanted to ask what kind of summer camp had an armory, but there was too much else to think about, so the tour continued. We saw the archery range, the canoeing lake, the stables, which Chiron didn't seem to like very much, the javelin range, the sing-along amphitheater, and the arena where Chiron said they held sword and spear fights. Sword and spear fights, I asked. Cabin challenges and all that, he explained. Not lethal, usually. Oh yes, and there's the mess hall. Chiron pointed to an outdoor pavilion framed in white Grecian columns on a hill overlooking the sea. There were a dozen stone picnic tables. No roof, no walls. What do you do when it rains? I asked. Chiron looked at me as if I'd gone a little weird. We still have to eat, don't we? I decided to drop the subject. Finally, he showed me the cabins. There were 12 of them, nestled into the woods by the lake. They were arranged in a U, with 2 at the base and 5 in a row on either side. And they were, without a doubt, the most bizarre collection of buildings I had ever seen. Except for the fact that each had a large brass number above the door, odds on the left side, evens on the right. They looked absolutely nothing alike. Number 9 had smokestacks like a tiny factory. Number 4 had tomato vines on the walls and a roof made out of real grass. 7 seemed to be made of solid gold, which gleamed so much in the sunlight it was almost impossible to look at. I bet that's Apollo's. It could be Hermes, though. Hermes is ostentatious, so we'll see. They all faced a commons area about the size of a soccer field, dotted with Greek statues, fountains, flower beds, and a couple of basketball hoops, which were more my speed. In the center of the field was a huge stone-lined fire pit. Even though it was a warm afternoon, the hearth smoldered. A girl about 9 years old was tending the flames, poking the coals with a stick. That she's a Vestal Virgin! All right, sorry. My inner mythology nerd is speaking out. Mythology. Oh my gosh. This is a lot of fun.
Nerd.
The pair of cabins at the head of the field, numbers 1 and 2, looked like his and hers mausoleums. Big white marble boxes with heavy columns on the front. Cabin 1 was the biggest and bulkiest of the 12. Its polished bronze doors shimmered like a hologram, so that from different angles, lightning bolts seemed to streak across them. Cabin 2 was more graceful somehow, with slimmer columns garlanded with pomegranates and flowers. The walls were carved with images of peacocks. Zeus and Hera, I guessed? Correct, Chiron said. Their cabins look empty. Several of the cabins are. That's true. No one ever stays in 1 or 2. Okay, so each cabin had a different god, like a mascot. 12 cabins for the 12 Olympians. But why would some be empty? I stopped in front of the first cabin on the left, cabin 3. It wasn't high and mighty like cabin 1, but long and low and solid. The outer walls were of rough gray stone, studded with pieces of seashell and coral, as if the slabs had been hewn straight from the bottom of the ocean floor. I peeked inside the open doorway, and Chiron said, "Oh, I wouldn't do that!" Before he could pull me back, I caught the salty scent of the interior, like the wind on the shore at Montauk. The interior walls glowed like abalone. There were 6 empty bunk beds with silk sheets turned down, but there was no sign anyone had ever slept there. The place felt so sad and lonely. I was glad when Chiron put his hand on my shoulders and said, "Come along, Percy." Most of the other cabins were crowded with campers. Number 5 was bright red, a real nasty paint job, as if the color had been splashed on with buckets and fists. Aries. The roof was lined with barbed wire. A stuffed wild boar's head hung over the doorway, and its eyes seemed to follow me inside. Inside, I could see a bunch of mean-looking kids, both girls and boys, arm wrestling and arguing with each other while rock music blared. The loudest girl was maybe 13 or 14. She wore a size XXX half-camp blood t-shirt under a camouflage jacket. She zeroed in on me and gave me an evil sneer. She reminded me of Nancy Bobofit, though the camper girl was much bigger and tougher looking, and her hair was long and stringy and brown instead of red. I kept walking, trying to stay clear of Chiron's hooves. "We haven't seen any other centaurs," I observed. "No," said Chiron sadly. "My kinsmen are a wild and barbaric folk, I'm afraid. You might encounter them in the wilderness or at major sporting events, but you won't see them here." "You said your name was Chiron. Are you really?" He smiled down at me. "The Chiron from the stories? Trainer of Hercules and all that?" "Yes, Percy, I am." "But shouldn't you be dead?" Chiron paused, as if the question intrigued him. "I honestly don't know about should be. The truth is, I can't be dead. You see, eons ago, the gods granted my wish. I could continue the work I loved. I could be a teacher of heroes as long as humanity needed me. I gained much from that wish. And I gave up much. But I'm still here, so I can only assume I'm still needed. I thought about being a teacher for 3,000 years. It wouldn't have made my top 10 things to wish for list." "Doesn't it ever get boring?" No, he said. "Horribly depressing at times, but never boring." "Why depressing?" Chiron seemed to turn hard of hearing again. "Oh, look," he said. "Annabeth's waiting for us." The blonde girl I'd met at the big house was reading a book in front of the last cabin on the left, number 11. When we reached her, she looked over me critically, like she was still thinking about how much I drooled. I tried to see what she was reading, but I couldn't make out the title. I thought my dyslexia was acting up. Then I realized the title wasn't even English. The letters looked Greek to me. I mean, literally Greek. There were pictures of temples and statues and different kinds of columns, like those in an architecture book. "Annabeth," Chiron said, "I have master's archery class at noon. Would you take Percy from here?" "Yes, sir." "Cabin 11, Chiron told me, gesturing toward the doorway. "Make yourself at home." Out of all the cabins, 11 looked the most like a regular old summer camp cabin, with the emphasis on old. The threshold was worn down, the brown paint peeling. One over the doorway was one of the doctor symbols, a winged pole with 2 snakes wrapped around it. What did they call it? A caduceus. Yes, that's right. All right, so this one is Apollo. The gold one has got to be Hermes, then. It's just got to be Hermes. That's what I think. Inside, it was packed with people, both boys and girls, way more than the number of bunk beds. Sleeping bags were spread all over the floor. It looked like a gym where the Red Cross had set up an evacuation center. Chiron didn't go in. The door was too low for him. But when the campers saw him, they all stood respectfully. "Well, then," Chiron said. "Good luck, Percy. I'll see you at dinner." He galloped away toward the archery range. I stood in the doorway, looking around at the kids. They weren't bowing anymore. They were staring at me, sizing me up. I knew this routine. I'd gone through it enough at school. "Well," Annabeth prompted. "Go on." So naturally, I tripped coming in the door and made a total fool of myself. There were some snickers from the campers, but none of them said anything. Annabeth announced, "Percy Jackson, meet cabin 11. "Regular or undetermined?" somebody asked. I didn't know what to say, but Annabeth said, "Undetermined." Everybody groaned. A guy who was a little older than the rest came forward. Now, campers, that's what we're here for. Welcome, Percy. You can have that spot on the floor right over there." The guy was about 19. He looked pretty cool. He was tall and muscular, with short-cropped sandy hair and a friendly smile. He wore an orange tank top, cutoffs, sandals, and a leather necklace with 5 different colored clay beads. The only thing unsettling about his appearance was a thick white scar that ran from just beneath his right eye to his jaw, like an old knife slash. "This is Luke," Annabeth said, and her voice sounded different somehow. I glanced over and could have sworn she was blushing. She saw me looking, and her expression hardened again. "He's your counselor for now." "For now?" I asked. "You're undetermined," Luke explained patiently. "They don't know what cabin to put you in, so you're here. Cabin 11 takes all newcomers, all visitors." "Oh, it is! No, this is Hermes, because it is Caduceus. Oh, I got it wrong. This is Hermes one. That means the golden one. Sorry, I read ahead. Naturally, we would. Hermes is our patron, the god of travel. I had to finish that one. Yay! I like Hermes. Oh, glad. This is cool. Cool. Yay. Yay, Hermes." I looked at the tiny section of floor they'd given me. I had nothing to put there to mark it as my own. No luggage, no clothes, no sleeping bag. Just the Minotaur's horn. I thought about setting that down, but then I remembered that Hermes was also the god of thieves. I looked around at the campers' faces, some sullen and suspicious, some grinning stupidly, some eyeing me as if they were waiting for a chance to pick my pockets. "How long will I be here?" I asked. "Good question," Luke said. "Until you're determined." "How long will that take?" The campers all laughed. "Come on," Annabeth told me. "I'll show you the volleyball court." "I've already seen it." "Come on." She grabbed my wrist and dragged me outside. I could hear the kids of Cabin 11 laughing behind me. When we were a few feet away, Annabeth said, "Jackson, you have to do better than that." "What?" She rolled her eyes and mumbled under her breath. "I can't believe I thought you were the one." "What's your problem?" I was getting angry now. "All I know is I kill some bull guy." "Don't talk like that," Annabeth told me. "You know how many kids at this camp wish they'd had your chance? To get killed? To fight the Minotaur? What do you think we trained for?" I shook my head. Look, if the thing I thought really was the Minotaur, the same one in the stories, yes. Then there's only one? Yes. And he died like a gajillion years ago, right? Theseus killed him in the labyrinth, so monsters don't die, Percy. They can be killed, but they don't die. "Oh, thanks. That clears that up." "They don't have souls like you and me. You can dispel them for a while, maybe even for a whole lifetime if you're lucky, but they are primal forces. Chiron calls them archetypes. Eventually, they reform." I thought about Mrs. Dodds. "You mean if I killed one accidentally, with a sword? Your math teacher. That's right. She's still out there. You just made her very, very mad." "How did you know about Mrs. Dodds?" "You talk in your sleep." "You almost called her something. A fury? They're Hades' torturers, right?" Annabeth glanced nervously at the ground, as if she expected it to open up and swallow her. "You shouldn't call them by name, even here. We call them the kindly ones, if we have to speak of them at all." "Look, is there anything we can say without it thundering?" I sounded whiny, even to myself, but right then, I didn't care. Why do I have to stay in cabin 11 anyway? Why is everybody so crowded together? There are plenty of empty bunks right over there. I pointed to the first few cabins. Annabeth turned pale. "You don't just choose a cabin, Percy. It depends on who your parents are, or your parent." She stared at me, waiting for me to get it. "My mom is Sally Jackson," I said. "She works at the candy store in Grand Central Station. At least she used to." "I'm sorry about your mom, Percy, but that's not what I mean. I'm talking about your other parent, your dad. He's dead. I never knew him." Annabeth sighed. Clearly, she'd had this conversation before with other kids. "Your father's not dead, Percy." "How can you say that? You know him?" Annabeth sighed. "Oh, sorry. No, of course not." "Then how can you say, because I know you wouldn't be here if you were one of us? You don't know anything about me." "No?" She raised an eyebrow. "I bet you moved around from school to school. I bet you were kicked out of a lot of them." "How? Diagnosed with dyslexia? Probably ADHD, too?" I tried to swallow my embarrassment. What does that have to do with anything? Taken together, it's almost a sure sign. The letters float off the page when you read, right? That's because your mind is hardwired for ancient Greek. The ADHD, you're impulsive, can't sit still in the classroom. That's your battlefield reflexes. In a real fight, they'd keep you alive. As for the attention problems, that's because you see too much, Percy, not too little. Your senses are better than regular mortals. Of course the teachers want you medicated. Most of them are monsters. They don't want you seeing them for what they are. You sound like you went through the same thing. Most of the kids here did. If you weren't like us, you couldn't have survived the Minotaur, much less the ambrosia and nectar. Ambrosia and nectar? The food and drink we were giving you to make you better. Because that stuff would have killed a normal kid. It would have turned your blood to fire and your bones to sand and you'd be dead. Face it, you're a half-blood. A half-blood? I was reeling, so many questions I didn't know where to start. Then a husky voice yelled, "Well, a newbie!" I looked over. The big girl from the ugly red cabin was sauntering towards us. She had 3 other girls behind her, all big and ugly and mean-looking like her, all wearing camo jackets. "Clarice," Annabeth sighed, "why don't you go polish your spear or something?" "Sure, Miss Princess," the big girl said, "so I can run you through with it Friday night." "Ereses korakas," Anna said, which I somehow understood was Greek for "go to the crows," though I had a feeling it was a worse curse than it sounded. "You don't stand a chance." "We'll pulverize you," Clarice said, but her eye twitched. Perhaps she wasn't sure she could follow through on the threat. She turned to me. "Who's this little runt?" "Percy Jackson," Annabeth said. "Meet Clarice, daughter of Ares." I blinked. "Like the war god?" Clarice sneered. "You got a problem with that?" "No," I said, recovering my wits. "It explains the bad smell." Clarice growled. "We got an initiation ceremony for newbies, Percy. Whatever. Come on, I'll show you." "Clarice," Annabeth tried to say. "Stay out of it, wise girl." Ooh, I bet she's Athena. Annabeth looked pained, but she did stay out of it, and I didn't really want her help. I was the new kid. I had to earn my own rep. I handed Annabeth my Minotaur horn and got ready to fight, but before I knew it, Clarice had me by the neck and was dragging me toward a cinder block building that I knew immediately was the bathroom. I was kicking and punching. I'd been in plenty of fights before, but this big girl Clarice had hands like iron. She dragged me into the girls' bathroom. There was a line of toilets on one side and a line of shower stalls down the other. It smelled just like any public bathroom, and I was thinking, as much as I could think with Clarice ripping my hair out, that if this place belonged to the gods, they should have been able to afford classier johns. Clarice's friends were all laughing, and I was trying to find the strength I'd used to fight the Minotaur, but it just wasn't there. "Like he's big 3 material," Clarice said as she pushed me toward one of the toilets. "Yeah, right. Minotaur probably fell over laughing. He was so stupid looking." Her friends snickered. Annabeth stood in the corner, watching through her fingers. Clarice bent me over on my knees and started pushing my head toward the toilet bowl. It reeked like rusted pipes and, well, like what goes into toilets. I strained to keep my head up. I was looking at the scummy water thinking, I will not go into that. I won't. Then something happened. I felt a tug in the pit of my stomach. I heard the plumbing rumble, the pipes shudder. Clarice's grip on my hair loosened. Water shot out of the toilet, making an arc straight over my head, and the next thing I knew, I was sprawled on the bathroom tiles, with Clarice screaming behind me. I turned just as water blasted out of the toilet again, hitting Clarice straight in the face so hard it pushed her down onto her butt. The water stayed on her like a spray from a fire hose, pushing her backward into the shower stall. She struggled, gasping, and her friends started coming toward her. But then the other toilets exploded too, and 6 more streams of toilet water blasted them back. The showers acted up too, and together all the fixtures sprayed the camouflage girls right out of the bathroom, spinning them around like pieces of garbage being washed away. As soon as they were out of the door, I felt the tug in my gut lessen, and the water shut off as quickly as it had started. The entire bathroom was flooded. Annabeth hadn't been spared. She was dripping wet, but she hadn't been pushed out the door. She was standing in exactly the same place, staring at me in shock. I looked down and realized I was sitting in the only dry spot in the whole room. There was a circle of dry floor around me. I didn't have 1 drop of water on my clothes. Nothing. I stood up, my legs shaky. Annabeth said, "How did you?" I don't know. We walked to the door. Outside, Clarice and her friends were sprawled in the mud. A bunch of other campers had gathered around to gawk. Clarice's hair was flattened across her face. Her camouflage jacket was sopping and she smelled like sewage. She gave me a look of absolute hatred. You are dead, new boy. You are totally dead. I probably should have let it go, but I said, you want to gargle with toilet water again, Clarice? Close your mouth. Her friends had to hold her back. They dragged her toward cabin 5, while the other campers made way to avoid her flailing feet. Annabeth stared at me. I couldn't tell whether she was just grossed out or angry at me for dousing her. What? I demanded. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, she said, that I want you on my team for capture the flag. That was awesome! Chapter 7. My dinner goes up in smoke. Word of the bathroom incident spread immediately. Wherever I went, campers pointed at me and murmured something about toilet water. Or maybe they were just staring at Annabeth, who was still pretty much dripping wet. She showed me a few more places, the metal shop, where kids were forging their own swords, the arts and crafts room, where satyrs were sandblasting a giant marble statue of a goat man, and the climbing wall, which actually consisted of 2 facing walls that shook violently, dropped boulders, sprayed lava, and clashed together if you didn't get to the top fast enough. Finally, we returned to the canoeing lake, where the trail led back to the cabins. I've got training to do, Annabeth said flatly. Dinner's at 7:30. Just follow your cabin to the mess hall. Annabeth, I'm sorry about the toilets. Whatever. It wasn't my fault. She looked at me skeptically, and I realized it was my fault. I'd made the water shoot out of the bathroom fixtures. I didn't understand how, but the toilets had responded to me. I had become one with the plumbing. You need to talk to the Oracle, Annabeth said. Who? Not who. What? The Oracle. I'll ask Chiron. I stared into the lake, wishing somebody would give me a straight answer for once. I wasn't expecting anybody to be looking back at me from the bottom, so my heart skipped a beat when I noticed 2 teenage girls sitting cross-legged at the base of the pier, about 20 feet below. They wore blue jeans and shimmering green t-shirts, and their brown hair floated loose around their shoulders as minnows darted in and out. They smiled and waved as if I were a long-lost friend. I didn't know what else to do. I waved back. Don't encourage them, Annabeth warned. Naiads are terrible flirts. Naiads, I repeated, feeling completely overwhelmed. That's it. I want to go home now. Annabeth frowned. Don't you get it, Percy? You are home. This is the only safe place on Earth for kids like us. You mean mentally disturbed kids? I mean not human. Not totally human anyway. Half human. Half human and half what? I think you know. I didn't want to admit it, but I was afraid I did. I felt a tingling in my limbs, a sensation I sometimes felt when my mom talked about my dad. God, I said. Half God. Annabeth nodded. Your father isn't dead, Percy. He's one of the Olympians. That's crazy. Is it? What's the most common thing gods did in the old stories? They ran around falling in love with humans and having kids with them. Do you think they've changed their habits in the last few millennia? But those are just... I almost said myths again. Then I remembered Chiron's warning that in 2,000 years, I might be considered a myth. But if all the kids here are half-gods, demigods, Annabeth said. That's the official term. Or half-bloods. Then who's your dad? Her hands tightened around the pier railing. I got the feeling I'd just trespassed on a sensitive subject. My dad is a professor at West Point, she said. I haven't seen him since I was very small. He teaches American history. He's human. What? You assume it has to be a male god who finds a human female attractive? How sexist is that? Who's your mom, then? Cabin 6. Meaning? Annabeth straightened. Athena, goddess of wisdom and battle. Totally called it! Okay, I thought. Why not? And my dad? Undetermined, Annabeth said. Like I told you before, nobody knows. Except my mother. She knew. Maybe not, Percy. Gods don't always reveal their identities. My dad would have. He loved her. Annabeth gave me a cautious look. She didn't want to burst my bubble. Maybe you're right. Maybe he'll send a sign. That's the only way to know for sure. Your father has to send you a sign claiming you as his son. Sometimes it happens. You mean sometimes it doesn't? Annabeth ran her palm along the rail. The gods are busy. They have a lot of kids and they don't always... Well, sometimes they don't care about us, Percy. They ignore us. I thought about some of the kids I'd seen in the Hermes cabin. Teenagers who looked sullen and depressed, as if they were waiting for a call that would never come. I'd known kids like that at Yancey Academy, shuffled off to boarding school by rich parents who didn't have the time to deal with them. But the gods should behave better. So I'm stuck here, I said. That's it? For the rest of my life? It depends, Annabeth said. Some campers only stay the summer. If you're a child of Aphrodite or Demeter, you're probably not a real powerful force. The monsters might ignore you, so you can get by with a few months of summer training and live in the mortal world the rest of the year. But for some of us, it's too dangerous to leave. We're year-rounders. In the mortal world, we attract monsters. They sense us. They come to challenge us. Most of the time, they'll ignore us until we're old enough to cause trouble, about 10 or 11 years old. But after that, most demigods either make their way here or they get killed off. A few manage to survive in the outside world and become famous. Believe me, if I told you the names, you'd know them. Some don't even realize they're demigods, but very few are like that. So monsters can't get in here. Annabeth shook her head. Not unless they're intentionally stalked in the woods or specially summoned by somebody on the inside. Why would anybody want to summon a monster? Practice fights. Practical jokes. Practical jokes? The point is, the borders are sealed to keep mortals and monsters out. From the outside world, mortals look into the valley and see nothing unusual. Just a strawberry farm. So, you're a year-rounder? Annabeth nodded. From under the collar of her t-shirt, she pulled a leather necklace with 5 clay beads of different colors. It was just like Luke's, except Annabeth also had a big gold ring strung on it. Like a college ring. I've been here since I was 7, she said. Every August, on the last day of summer session, you get a bead for surviving another year. I've been here longer than most of the counselors, and they're all in college. Why did you come so young? She twisted the ring on her necklace. None of your business. Oh. I stood there for a minute in uncomfortable silence. So I could just walk out of here right now if I wanted to. It would be suicide, but you could, with Mr. D's or Chiron's permission. But they wouldn't give you permission until the end of the summer session, unless you were granted a quest. But that hardly ever happens. The last time... Her voice trailed off. I could tell from her tone that the last time hadn't gone well. Back in the sick room, I said, when you were feeding me that stuff. Ambrosia. Yeah. You asked me something about the summer solstice. Annabeth's shoulders tense. So you do know something? Well, no. Back at my old school, I overheard Grover and Chiron talking about it. Grover mentioned the summer solstice. He said something like we didn't have much time because of the deadline. What did that mean? She clenched her fists. I wish I knew. Chiron and the satyrs, they know, but they won't tell me. Something is wrong in Olympus. Something pretty major. Last time I was there, everything seemed so normal. You've been to Olympus? Some of us year-rounders, Luke and Clarice and I and a few others, we took a field trip during the winter solstice. That's when the gods have their big annual council. But how did you get there? The Long Island Railroad, of course. You get off at Penn Station, Empire State Building, special elevator to the 600th floor. She looked at me like she was sure I must know this already. You are a New Yorker, right? Oh, sure. As far as I knew, there were only 102 floors in the Empire State Building, but I decided not to point that out. Right after we visited, Annabeth continued, the weather got weird, as if the gods had started fighting. A couple of times since, I've overheard satyrs talking. The best I can figure out is that something important was stolen, and if it isn't returned by summer solstice, there is going to be trouble. When you came, I was hoping... Athena can get along with just about anybody except for Ares. And of course she's got a rivalry with Poseidon, but aside from that, I thought we could work together. I thought you might know something. I shook my head. I wished I could help her, but I felt too hungry and tired and mentally overloaded to ask any more questions. I've got to get a quest, Annabeth muttered to herself. I'm not too young. If they would just tell me the problem. I could smell barbecue smoke coming from somewhere nearby. Annabeth must have heard my stomach growl. She told me to go on, she'd catch me later. I left her on the pier, tracing her finger along the rail as if drawing out a battle plan. Back at cabin 11, everybody was talking and horsing around, waiting for dinner. For the first time, I noticed that a lot of the campers had similar features. Sharp noses, upturned eyebrows, mischievous smiles. They were the kind of kids that teachers would peg as troublemakers. Thankfully, nobody paid much attention to me as I walked over to my spot on the floor and plopped down with my minotaur horn. The counselor, Luke, came over. He had the Hermes family resemblance, too. It was marred by that scar on his right cheek, but his smile was intact. "Found you a sleeping bag," he said. "And here, I stole you some toiletries from the camp store." I couldn't tell if he was stealing about the camp. I couldn't tell if he was kidding about the stealing part. I said, "Thanks." "No problem." Luke sat next to me, pushed his back against the wall. "Tough first day?" "I don't belong here," I said. "I don't even believe in gods." "Yeah," he said. "That's how we all started. Once you start believing in them, it doesn't get any easier." The bitterness in his voice surprised me because Luke sounded like a pretty easygoing guy. He looked like he could handle just about anything. "So your dad is Hermes?" I asked. He pulled a switchblade out of his back pocket, and for a second I thought he was going to gut me, but he just scraped mud off the sole of his sandal. "Yeah, Hermes. The wing-footed messenger guy." "That's him. Messengers, medicine, travelers, merchants, thieves, anybody who uses the roads. That's why you're here enjoying Cabin 11's hospitality. Hermes isn't picky about who he sponsors." I figured Luke didn't mean to call me a nobody. He just had a lot on his mind. "You ever meet your dad?" I asked. "Once." I waited, thinking that if he wanted to tell me, he'd tell me. Apparently he didn't. I wondered if the story had anything to do with how he got his scar. Luke looked up and managed to smile. "Don't worry about it, Percy. The campers here, they're mostly good people. After all, we're extended family, right? We take care of each other." He seemed to understand how lost I felt, and I was grateful for that, because an older guy like him, even if he was a counselor, should have steered cool of an uncool middle schooler like me. But Luke had welcomed me into the cabin. He'd even stolen me some toiletries, which was the nicest thing anybody had done for me all day. I decided to ask him my last big question, the one that had been bothering me all afternoon. Clarice, from Ares, was joking about me being Big 3 material. Then Annabeth, twice, she said I might be the one. She said I should talk to the Oracle. What was that all about? Luke folded his knife. "I hate prophecies." "What do you mean?" His face twitched around the scar. "Let's just say I messed things up for everybody else. The last 2 years, ever since my trip to the Garden of the Hesperides went sour, Chiron hasn't allowed any more quests. Annabeth's been dying to get out into the world. She pestered Chiron so much he finally told her he already knew her fate. He'd have a prophecy from the Oracle. He wouldn't tell her the whole thing, but he said Annabeth wasn't destined to go on a quest yet. She had to wait until somebody special came to the camp." "Somebody special?" "Don't worry about it, kid," Luke said. "Annabeth wants to think every new camper who comes through here is the omen she's been waiting for. Now, come on, it's dinner time." The moment he said it, a horn blew in the distance. Somehow, I knew it was a conch shell, though I'd never heard one before. Luke yelled, "11, fall in!" The whole cabin, about 20 of us, filed into the commons yard. We lined up in order of seniority, so of course I was dead last. Campers came from the other cabins too, except for the 3 empty cabins at the end, and cabin 8, which looked normal in the daytime, but now started to glow silver as the sun went down. "That's Artemis's one! Sorry, not to bust in. Cool." And of course there are no kids there, because Artemis doesn't do that. I thought Athena didn't do that either, but, whatever. I'll allow it. We marched up the hill to the mess hall pavilion. Satyrs joined us from the meadow. Naiads emerged from the canoeing lake. A few other girls came out of the woods. And when I say out of the woods, I mean straight out of the woods. Oh no, those are the Artemis girls! I saw one girl about 9 or 10 years old melt from the side of a maple tree and come skipping up the hill. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm sorry, I keep busting in here.
Opinions on mythology.
In all, there were maybe 100 campers, a few dozen satyrs, and a dozen assorted wood nymphs and naiads. At the pavilion, torches blazed around the marble columns. A central fire burned in a bronze brazier the size of a bathtub. Each cabin had its own table, covered in white cloth trimmed in purple. 4 of the tables were empty, but cabin 11's was way overcrowded. I had to squeeze onto the edge of a bench with half my butt hanging off. I saw Grover sitting at table 12 with Mr. D, a few satyrs, and a couple of plump blonde boys who looked just like Mr. D. Chiron stood to one side, the picnic table being way too small for a centaur. Annabeth sat at table 6 with a bunch of other serious-looking athletic kids, all with her gray eyes and honey blonde hair. Clarissa sat behind me at Aries' table. She'd apparently gotten over being hosed down because she was laughing and belching right alongside her friends. Finally, Chiron pounded his hoof against the marble floor of the pavilion, and everybody felt silent. He raised a glass. To the gods! Everybody else raised their glasses. To the gods! Oh, thank you for explaining that. I look forward to... sorry, I was reading the chat. Everybody who wasn't reading the chat. Apparently the Athena thing gets explained, which is nice. I look forward to that explanation. And also to avoiding the sunlight, which is right in the middle. Wood nymphs came forward with platters of food, grapes, apples, strawberries, cheese, fresh bread, and yes, barbecue. My glass was empty, but Luke said, "Speak to it, whatever you want." Non-alcoholic, of course. I said, "Cherry Coke." The glass filled with sparkling caramel liquid. Then I had an idea. Blue cherry Coke. The soda turned a violent shade of cobalt. I took a cautious sip. Perfect. I drank a toast to my mother. She's not gone, I told myself. Not permanently, anyway. She's in the underworld, and if that's a real place, then someday... "Here you go, Percy," Luke said, handing me a platter of smoked brisket. I loaded my plate and was about to take a big bite when I noticed everybody getting up, carrying their plates toward the fire in the center of the pavilion. I wondered if they were going for dessert or something. "Come on," Luke told me. As I got closer, I saw that everybody was taking a portion of their meal and dropping it into the fire. The ripest strawberry, the juiciest slice of beef, the warmest, most buttery roll. Luke murmured in my ear, "Burnt offerings for the gods. They like the smell." "You're kidding." His look warned me not to take this lightly, but I couldn't help wondering why an immortal, all-powerful being would like the smell of burning food. Luke approached the fire, bowed his head, and tossed a cluster of fat red grapes. Hermes. I was next. I wished I knew what God's name to say. Finally, I made a silent plea. "Whoever you are, tell me, please." When I caught a whiff of the smoke, I didn't gag. It smelled nothing like burning food. It smelled of hot chocolate and fresh-baked brownies, hamburgers on the grill and wildflowers, and 100 other good things that shouldn't have gone well together, but did. I could almost believe the gods could live off of that smoke. When everybody had returned to their seats and finished eating their meals, Chiron pounded his hoof again for our attention. Mr. D got up with a huge sigh. "Yes, I suppose I better say hello to all you brats. Well, hello. Our activities director, Chiron, says the next capture the flag is Friday. Cabin 5 presently holds the laurels." A bunch of ugly cheering rose from the Aries table. "Personally," Mr. D continued, "I couldn't care less, but congratulations. Also, I should tell you that we have a new camper today, Peter Johnson." Chiron murmured something. Percy Jackson," Mr. D corrected. "That's all right. Hurrah and all that. Now run along to your silly campfire. Go on." Everybody cheered. We all headed down toward the amphitheater where Apollo's cabin let us sing along. We sang camp songs about the gods and ate s'mores and joked around, and the funny thing was, I didn't feel that anyone was staring at me anymore. I felt that I was home. Later in the evening, when the sparks from the campfire were curling into a starry sky, the conch horn blew again, and we all filed back to our cabins, I didn't realize how exhausted I was until I collapsed on my borrowed sleeping bag. My fingers curled around the Minotaur's horns. I thought about my mom, but I had good thoughts. Her smile, the bedtime story she would read me when I was a kid, the way she would tell me not to let the bed bugs bite. When I closed my eyes, I fell asleep instantly. That was my first day at Camp Half-Blood. I wish I'd known how briefly I would get to enjoy my new home. And with that, we are going to end it. I know 2 chapters isn't a lot, but 2 chapters takes us to about an hour, and that's about all the energy I have at the moment. It's going to be a crazy few months, but I really enjoy these live streams. They kept me sane through the beginning of quarantine, and they're keeping me sane through the move. So thanks for everyone who watches these. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. All right. I love you all. Bye. And